morning and welcome to Fox Valley Headline Makers. I'm your host Tyler Bachman here with you today, and very, very excited for this episode. It's been one that I've been hoping to do for quite a while. I'm joined here today by one of our own here at WSPY, Mark Harrington, our feature reporter, in with us today. And Mark, I do want to thank you a lot for coming in, and I look forward to telling some stories with you today.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about quite a few things. Mark, you here do a lot of feature writing for us on some of your weekend stories. Also, a beat reporter like a lot of us here as well. But first off, I wanted to tell our viewers and listeners just a little bit about yourself and some of your background. So why don't you go ahead and tell the individuals where you come from?
Well, I grew up in Sandwich for the first 4 years, and we moved off the farm, so to speak, and moved to Oswego, where I went to school there and graduated. And then I went to Southern Illinois University and got my teaching degree.
Yep.
After I'd worked at the Beacon News and the recession hit and my hours got slashed by the Copley chain, and so I decided, well, I'd go into teaching. So I taught 3 years at Minooka and 29 years at Lyle, teaching first, third, and fifth grades at different parts and coaching junior high and high school sports.
Yep. Well, one of the funniest things for me, the first day that you came here, I found out Mark worked with my mom for a number of years there at Lyle.
Yes, her and I were with the association. I, learned everything about unions and association work through your mom.
Sure. Well, so tell me first off a little bit about your background in reporting. I know you obviously mentioned a little bit, but what got you first into wanting to tell stories?
I think, just growing up in a house, my parents were older, and, we would come to Sandwich, and it was like Prairie Home Companion. It was a homecoming because my parents grew up there, and my cousins and relatives lived there. And so there was a story on every street. Mm-hmm. And, we'd go out to the cemetery at Oak Ridge, and there was a story at every, seemed like every tombstone, kind of like the Spoon River Anthology. And so always been interested in the old times and finding out things about people and events.
Yeah. One thing that I've learned from you working here with you is we can drive around places and you got a story out of every little corner in the county and whatnot. And I'm sure that just comes from talking with people and learning about the area.
That and back in the day there was not a lot of money in our family, but every Sunday there was a possibility of a Sunday drive. And so there was a story every time we went out there. For example, the time we went south of Somonauk and Sandwich and we were off of Route 23, there was Shabana County Park with the Indian Creek Massacre back in the 1830s.
Yeah.
And so we went there, and I still do those Sunday drives, sometimes put a little jazz music on, but it's true, every corner, you can go to Little Rock, and there's the old Stagecoach Hotel. Now it's been demolished after a fire. Mm-hmm. You go to Oswego, and there's the Wabansie Creek behind the library. You go to Plano. One of my first times in Plano was going over a single-lane iron truss bridge with my uncle going to Millbrook to pick up coal.
Sure.
Excuse me. And, in Yorkville, there's the Fox River where I canoed several years with the Boy Scouts camping at Cornfield Island. So, a lot of memories from this area. I know you've been able to meet a lot of people. Sometimes they give me ideas that work out.
I was going to say, and we'll talk about some of your feature stories here, especially from the last year. In your years as being a reporter around the Fox Valley area here and whatnot, is there one or two really memorable stories that you still look back at and think, wow, that was a really cool experience to report on?
I've learned this from somebody, I can't remember. The next story is always the best one.
Yeah.
But in the past year, that the overnight stay in Mendota and then the Max Ambler manhunt in Earlville, being able to be there and watching the Chicago, 5 stations of the Chicago media work on that story, and yet being one of the first on the scenes when he was in Earlville with Channel 5 was very interesting.
You stayed there through the night, essentially, seeing what was going to happen. And I remember that was October, I think, is when this all went down. And you and I were communicating a lot, basically figuring out what was going to be next from the authorities when they were going to be releasing information, any updates on the case, and there were so many moving parts to that, and having the presence online to share the information as well as on air was something we worked pretty hard on, I know.
Yeah, I think we did a pretty good job. You know, I kept thinking he was going to come out of the cornfields or out of the wooded area, and he'd already been out of there supposedly during the day. And Earlville being a small town, but with implications with Leland and just LaSalle County, a very interesting story.
Yeah, there were so many things to it as well, like City Hall had to cancel their council meeting at night, the schools were going on lockdown, there was so much back and forth. There was really, we're talking 3 counties that were involved in this, because Ambler had gone out to Plainfield and then had essentially come back to his area there and was hiding out in the wooded area. And they ended up finding him in town, from what I remember, at that house. But yeah, that was certainly one. And that morning, I remember you and I were communicating a lot, because you were doing updates every half hour, essentially, on our newscast.
Yeah, it was interesting when he came out of the house. He, came out and took 2 steps down, then put his hands up to show that he had no weapons. Whether he was, asked to do that or he knew, because he was a LaSalle County sheriff, former deputy. Yeah. And then he walked to the sidewalk and pulled up his pant legs one at a time to show that he had no weapons there. Right. And then slowly, got to the ground while the Joliet SWAT team was moving down the street at the same time. Yep,
that was a big story for us this year. And well, I want to touch on a couple things a little lighter here, and we'll get back to some of the other things. But one of the most fun things I think that I've had talking with you about this year is you did a little WSPY on the road reporting and went down south to Southern Illinois to go and experience the eclipse this summer. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Well, I met up with some college friends, seeing how I went to school there, and we were at McCanda, which is a small little town nestled in the hills. And while we were there, I was expecting it to be pitch black, dark, where you couldn't hardly see. And I'd been through one during my days back in 1979, the last one. Yep. So I kind of knew what to expect. But this was the epicenter, and it was like a mini Woodstock festival. The atmosphere, as it got closer and closer, probably the most interesting thing was I thought I would beat traffic back north.
Yes, I remember this.
So I left about a little after 2 and didn't get home till almost 2. Yeah. And traffic really didn't break up until about Rochelle.
Right.
So that was an interesting day.
Well, was it interesting to see you said the amount of people that were there, and the strangest thing too, I can't even imagine, because up here, we had done a couple stories on seeing maybe a partial eclipse. Unfortunately, it was pretty cloudy that day up here around Kendall County, but there you had it go dark in the middle of the day.
Yeah, it went dusk, like the people had glasses, they had all sorts of things to view that. The crowd reaction, I think, was the most fascinating thing.
I'm trying to remember, you talked with a couple people there was like someone from Australia, I think you spoke
There
with.
were people from all over that had been to college there. There was a couple that I knew from Rock Island. They came from all over to this place to just view the eclipse.
Yeah, well, great. Well, let's move gears over to this, I guess. We had a story, one of your features a couple months back, about the Oswego History Museum and some of the activities going on there. I know Roger Mateel, was that who you were speaking with on that one?
Yeah, and the thing with that museum is so good is they have different displays set up throughout the year, whether it's Valentine's Day, Veterans Day, going back to school. And that's the way a museum should be, because a regular museum that you can go 3 years and still see the same things is kind of static, not very interesting. But one that is lively will have programs and will have changing displays.
Yeah, and this one for Veterans Day is what I think.
This was for Veterans Day. They do a annual Veterans Day observance that keeps growing and growing.
Yeah. One of the other interesting ones I know you had this year too was you went to Wedren and a house where Lindy apparently had slept in.
Charles Lindbergh had a plane crash about 6 months before he did his famous cross-Atlantic flight, And so the lady was there, kindly took me and showed me where his bedroom was that day, and it's decorated there. It's a bed and breakfast now, and that's a piece of history that probably not a lot of people know, and that's what makes a great story.
Well, and there were a couple of cool artifacts in there from what I remember there was newspaper clippings of him, pictures of him, and wasn't the bed he actually slept in was in that room?
Yeah, the bed that was there is all set up in the period furnishings.
Very cool, very cool. Well, let's see, what else did we do this year? I think we had the story as well that you had on the feature story about the sandwich pilots from the 50s that were involved in that crash, and kind of the unknowns of that incident. Maybe give people a little background on that.
The thing that was interesting there was I started doing the research. I saw where they were going to be honored, and then next thing I hooked up with Kendall Wallace of Sandwich, who's a historian, and we kind of traded notes and did an interview with him, and to find out that these pilots have flown across the Atlantic, and their plane went down. They knew there were Russian ships and trawlers and subs in the area, and when the rescuers for our side got there, they were vanished. The plane had vanished, and so they, the speculation is that they were in the Gulag over in the Soviet Union, spent their remaining days in forced labor.
Yeah. Well, that was one that I know in this area that it was really timely as well, because there was the ceremony that was taking place in Sandwich, I believe, that same weekend we ran that story.
Right, and their children never knew. They were always told by the government that they were missing in action, and then presumed dead. And here they may have been alive.
Sure. One of the coolest things I think that I've seen in the progression of some of your stories is talking about different things around here, but also there was one story you did this year that I think we're going to submit it for an award. We're going to have to. You did a story about that hit close to home to you, that actually involved one of your family members, involved your mom, and I think it'd be interesting for maybe the listeners that didn't get a chance to read that story. Tell them about that one.
Well, my mom, when she was widowed, she was going to get the mail one day. She was in her late 80s and went to get a branch out of the roadside ditch, and there was snow on the ground, and she got stuck and could not get out. She would wave at cars. Those people would wave back.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden here showed up a police officer from Plano, and we teased her, "Mom, you live in Oswego. There's a Plano police officer is not coming into our area subdivision," but he helped her out. And so then when I started working for the radio side, I was covering Plano, and I had driven around the old neighborhood, and I saw that Plano police car, and then in talking to Jonathan Houle, realized he lived in Oswego, put two and two together, and we reconnected on that story for kind of a Mother's Day type story.
Yep, and he helped her out.
He helped her out of the ditch, brought her to the house, made sure she was okay.
Yeah,
and he was just a regular police officer, and then he wasn't the
I was going to say, how many years ago or so was that, you think?
Probably 20 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting that it just kind of tied you together, bringing that back now. So well, great. Well, I think we'll touch on one more here. We might take a break after this, but the story that I couldn't believe my eyes with when we first heard about it, and it turned out to just be a fun, really cool event. Bologna Day. We had Bologna, Illinois created between Sandwich and Plano, and man, that had a little fun planning. I know our Chris Schwemline was involved in that as well, and let's talk about that one a little bit.
You never know what you're going to be sent out as a feature reporter. And so I showed up at Bologna Day, and I saw them frying the bologna, big slabs, thick slabs. If I exaggerate, although it wouldn't be much of exaggeration, they were the size of a 45 record, probably a half-inch thick, with the onions, and people were gobbling those down. I got to talk to Mr. Rudd, the butcher, who was the honorary mayor of Sandwich, and that was very interesting. But I think it's very interesting to see both cities come together, putting high school sports or rivalries aside, which town is better, Plano or Sandwich, coming together, meeting halfway.
Well, it was a nice, fun, tongue-in-cheek event, and it came about based off the old joke that people hear around here, the plain old bologna sandwich, right?
Yep. poor Somonauk and Yorkville gets left out.
That's true. Well, and I know at that event, I got to go over there a little bit and see it, and there was everything from they made buttons for it with a design, and I think IVCC maybe was the ones that had made those. I don't remember off the top of my head, but they had made a logo for the city and whatnot, and there was even a little water tower I remember seeing over there.
Chris Schwimline did that water
Did he?
tower.
Is that what he made?
Yeah.
Yep. And that was just a fun event. So and I remember speaking with Rick Olson and Bob Hauser a little bit about it, and said, we'll never know. Maybe we could make it an annual event. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully next year, if they do it again, they can do it outside, because I remember the one thing that did happen is because it was a little chilly that day, couldn't hold it in the spot. Yeah. So, well, very good. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back after this with Mark Harrington.
The color in my garden keeps the pink in my cheeks. I was very independent and thought I could take care of myself. I fell and I had to have Meals on Wheels. They're my savior. My name is Lola Silvestri. America, let's do lunch.
Drop off a hot meal and say hello. Volunteer by donating your lunch break at America Let's Do Lunch.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
They call me Prince like I'm royalty or something. But the places I've lived ain't no palaces. So I don't need grilled salmon or a new scratching post. Just give me a cardboard box and a can of tuna and we're good. You can even change my name. I'm cool being the kitty formerly known as Prince.
They're coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Welcome back to Fox Valley Headline Makers. Tyler Bachman, your host here today. And again, here in the studios with us, one of our own, Mark Harrington, our feature reporter here at WSPY, also beat reporter for Plano, Oswego, and really whatever else we throw at you, right?
Yeah, I'm well-traveled. Lee County, Macanda, the National Farm Progress Show, Decatur.
Yes, that was right. That's right. Well, we're going to talk about a few of our local, city government topics recently. We'll first start off on talking about one that was strange, something I had not seen before, and your most recent Saturday feature story we ran this past weekend. And I suppose I'm not sure how exactly we can throw it into this, but we'll call it what it is. We'll say a little bit, there could be a bit of a poo patrol in the the upcoming apartment complex bill that's been proposed in Oswego. Let's talk a bit about what you heard from the developer at that meeting.
The developer shocked us all. Showed up, when the developers show up, they're usually in their suit coats and ties, and this was a younger guy. But this development firm out of Wisconsin has other places, and they employ, if you have a pet, you have to have that pet registered with them and provide a DNA sample, probably a swab of a cheek or a hair follicle or whatever. And so that when you are out walking your dog, whether it be on the common grounds or in their dog park, and you forget to pick up after Spot, the Poo Patrol is out there, and they will pick it up, and they will send it in to DNA testing. And when they find it, the first time you have to pay the cost, which is about $50. Then it gets a little steeper, and they've found that It eliminates those forgetful people, we should say.
Right.
And so that was kind of caught everybody off guard, little chuckles from the village trustees.
Yep.
But in researching it, Kenosha, Wisconsin has it, and other cities, Seattle. It's a thing that could be a wave of the future, that they will bring back the old dog license tags.
Yeah.
And then when you register your dog, they will have a sample of hair, and they will be able to find out.
Yeah, and, it's funny. People probably laugh at it, and it's humorous, but it's something to think about. That this probably actually does work, and it's something that can be useful to keep from your dog as a culprit, leaving his disposal there or whatnot. So
you just never know what the next day is going to bring in news.
Yeah. Well, about that apartment complex build, can you tell us a little background on that? Where maybe I'm trying to remember where that's going to be located.
It's going to be off of 5th Street behind the Market Square Shopping Center.
Yeah.
It's going to be a gated community. It's going to be for mainly probably seniors.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, very good. So in terms of Oswego Village Board topics we've also been talking about recently, probably one of the biggest ones that essentially is very close to being signed off on at this point is the reserve at Hudson Crossing, as it's being called. I think Shodine is the developer on that project, and that's going to be right downtown there, the Alexander Lumber property.
Yes, and as the village officials call it, they see that as a linchpin to revitalizing downtown Oswego, bringing more people downtown. It's going to have shops. It's going to have, as well as private parking for the apartments. It's going to have public parking, which is always needed in any community. And it's located on the property that was a former Alexander Lumber Company.
Right.
Shodine is building a similar one in Batavia. And in watching that city government meeting, the Batavia residents and a few of the aldermen were concerned that their project with Shodine was going to look very similar to Oswego, and they wanted theirs to be more unique in that city. Out of the committee of the whole, it went 7-6, with one board member absent from the city council.
Yep.
Then it became tied at the city council meeting 7-7. The mayor, Jeff Schelke, longtime mayor there, broke the tie in favor, and so that development is now proceeding.
Yeah.
I know Oswego officials, in talking to them last week, we're watching that because that may have implications, the Batavia project with the Oswego project.
Sure.
Shodine also owns the former site of the Aurora train station on South Broadway, but had to do some soil remediation, and that has been sat vacant for several years.
Yeah. Well, and I know the development we're talking about, it's like you said, it's not a small development. It's like a $56 million deal they're looking at, and it's essentially, I think they even said it would be the tallest building Oswego has ever seen at this point in terms of that multi-use facility that would be put there.
Yeah, they're going to take down, there'll be 3 houses. It's going to expand over Jackson Street. And one of the houses has a very historic look and supposedly is supposed to be very unique inside. And so they're working right now to possibly either sell that and have it relocated to a different piece of property within the village.
Yep. And also in the downtown in Oswego, there's we've had the stories about the discussion on Potter's developers. They own Potter's Place in Naperville, and I think there's one more as well. But looking to put that where it would have been the old Oswego Township Village Hall at one point. There's a building there right now.
Right, correct. This is a 2-story frame building. It used to be home of the several different branches of the village government, but over the years, the roof needs replacing. There is some possible mold and mildew issues, leaking of the roof. So not very much of a historical building from the outside, definitely historic on the inside. The Red Cross did bandage wrapping back in World War I days in the upstairs floor. But that's another key redevelopment area, bringing Potter's to that location.
And there's been discussion, a lot of it, about the financing of that project. And I know I've done a couple stories with, speaking with, the Kendall County Board, our Jim Wyman, also discussing with them about the county's revolving loan fund was essentially slated to finance a big deal of that loan, a big deal of that finance, I should say, for the build. But that is essentially fallen through at this point, as we've seen. The state and the county's, I guess, ideas of how it could work are not meshing at this point. I've spoken with Dan DeSanto in Oswego, the village administrator, who's essentially said now they're going to be needing to look for private financing.
Right, and they've extended the contract with Potters to May of next year to allow more time to research and search for funding to assist this project and bring it to downtown Oswego.
Yep. Well, big stuff coming in Oswego, certainly to keep our eye on. And let's jump over to your other council beat for a second. Plano, I know there's been discussion about a historical society building that's there in Plano. They've been talking about that recently. So tell us a bit about that project.
There's a small red brick building that's by the library behind a former bank, ivy covered, has parking with the new parking lot right there. I think it's key that it's in the downtown area. Plano is probably one of the communities that does not have a historical building to put their artifacts in and tell the story of Plano. The problem is they're looking at, does it have asbestos? How much is it going to cost to rehabilitate? Who's going to pay for the rehabilitation of the building? It's not a done deal. There's a few council members that appear to be opposed at this point, that if the building is no good, that building should come down.
Sure. We'll keep our eye on that one as well. And fun event that I had the experience of with my first time this year is the Sandwich Fair. And I know you've had a lot of involvement with the fair for years, but we should certainly tell a few stories that we had out at the fair this year. First one that was coming to my mind thinking of is about there was the little boy and the big horse. That was the image I remember from one of the stories you covered from out there. So remind us on that one. There was a
boy from Leland, and I don't remember his name offhand, but he weighed only 70 pounds, a fifth grader, and here he was with a Clydesdale horse that outweighed him by 1,000 pounds, it seemed. And he was pulling that horse and trying to get his feet set, and then when he had to take the horse at the end of the horse arena and bring it back, the horse took off for the opening and he dug his heels in. And so that was a very unique story. Just, there's stories around every corner there at the fair. I enjoy that fair and look forward to next year. One of the stories I did was on the sounds and sights of the fair. For those people that maybe couldn't make it, and when I was in the hog barn and I put the microphone down by the big sow there, she didn't like that there, and she was about ready to eat the microphone.
Yes.
And but a lot of fun at the fair.
One of the stories I think I was able to put together from the days this year was the Agland stage. They had Max Armstrong up there doing the show on the noon show here on SPY, and essentially they brought a pig up on stage for him, and they wanted him to kiss him. Now, didn't necessarily see, so I can't report whether or not the kiss actually took place, but it was pretty funny.
No, Max said the only thing that touches his lips from a pig is bacon. And so, who knows what will happen next year. I think a milking contest between him and Larry Nelson would be a fun, the audience loves those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, let's end on this. Let's talk about a little bit of the story for Saturday we have coming up this weekend. It's the holiday time, and I know recently there was a number of events around our communities featuring Santa and those holiday festivities. So tell us about your story a little bit.
Well, I went to the Oswego Christmas walk, and the line for Santa was long, so it made interviewing kids easy. It's amazing when you interview little kids. You never know what they're going to say. Sometimes they become radio shy instead of camera shy. But and one girl embarrassed her mom. She wanted a dad for Christmas, and so I interviewed a bunch of children, a bunch of older adults, lots of people down there. Even got to interview Santa. And he has a plan if there's no snow on the ground come December 24th.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Mark. I enjoyed it.
Thanks.